Megan Walsh had been working at the Riverside Refugee Center for almost 3 years now, and she thought she'd seen everything. Aliens with too many eyes, others with no eyes at all. Species that breathed methane, ones that communicated through color changes, even a family that existed partially in another dimension. Earth had become the galaxy's unofficial halfway house, and Megan had somehow become one of its tired, underpaid teachers. The facility sat on the outskirts of Portland, a sprawling complex of prefab buildings that had been thrown together when the first refugee ships arrived. It wasn't fancy. The walls were thin, the heating barely worked in winter, and the coffee in the break room tasted like recycled spaceship fuel. But it was home to hundreds of displaced beings who had nowhere else to go. Megan's specialty was communication. While other staff handled medical screenings or housing assignments, she worked in a cramped classroom teaching aliens how to get by on Earth. Most days involved frustrated pointing, malfunctioning translation devices, and the occasional breakthrough moment that made the whole exhausting job worthwhile. Thursday afternoon started like any other. Megan was cleaning whiteboard markers off her desk when Director Hayes poked his head through the door. He was a heavy-set man with permanently worried eyes, probably from dealing with intergalactic bureaucracy all day. "Got a new one for you," he said. "Kashari. Just arrived on the morning transport." Megan looked up with interest. The Kashari were rare on Earth. Their species was famous throughout the galaxy as the great telepaths, the mind speakers who never needed words. They served as diplomats, negotiators, and advisors to a dozen different governments. Seeing one in a refugee center was like finding a billionaire in a homeless shelter. "What's a Kashari doing here?" Megan asked. Hayes shrugged. "Paperwork says she's claiming asylum. That's all I know. She's waiting in room 3. When Megan walked into the consultation room, she found the Kashari woman sitting perfectly still by the window. She was tall and willowy, maybe 6.5 feet, with smooth pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer slightly in the afternoon light. Her face was humanoid but more delicate, with high cheekbones and enormous amber eyes that held an almost liquid quality. She wore simple gray clothing that looked worn from travel. What struck Megan most was how sad she looked. Not scared or confused like most new arrivals. Just deeply, profoundly sad. "Hi there," Megan said warmly, pulling up a chair. "I'm Megan. I'm here to help you adjust to Earth and figure out communication. What's your name?" The Kashari woman looked at her and opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She tried again, her throat working, but still no sound. Then she touched her temple with those long, four-fingered hands, her expression growing frustrated. "Can't use telepathy either?" Megan asked gently. The woman shook her head, and Megan saw genuine fear flash across her face. For a Kashari, being unable to communicate must be like a human losing all their senses at once. Their entire civilization was built on mind-to-mind connection. "Okay, don't worry," Megan said, keeping her voice calm. "We'll figure something out. There's always a way." She grabbed her tablet and started with pictures, pointing to objects and having the woman write responses. That's how she learned her name, Vayara. The letters were shaky but readable in the standard galactic script. After 20 minutes of frustrating picture pointing, Megan had an idea. She held up her hands and made a simple sign, touching her fingers to her lips then extending her hand palm up. In American Sign Language, it meant "thank you." Vayara's eyes widened. She mimicked the gesture carefully, her four-fingered hands adapting it slightly but keeping the meaning clear. Megan grinned. "Yes. Exactly like that." For the next hour, they worked through basic signs. Hello. Yes. No. Help. Food. Water. Vayara absorbed each one like she was starving for it, her hands moving with increasing confidence. There was an intelligence in her eyes that reminded Megan this wasn't just any refugee. This was someone used to complex communication, now trapped in silence. By the end of the session, Vayara could sign simple sentences. Her amber eyes were brighter now, the sadness replaced with something like hope. When Megan signed "same time tomorrow," Vayara nodded eagerly. As the tall alien stood to leave, she suddenly reached out and took Megan's hands. The gesture was so human, so full of gratitude, that Megan felt a lump in her throat. Vayara signed "thank you" 3 times, then pressed Megan's hands to her own chest in what must have been a Kashari gesture of deep respect. "You're welcome," Megan said softly. "We're going to be okay. I promise." After Vayara left, Megan sat alone in the consultation room for a few minutes. Something about this felt different. Important somehow. She'd helped hundreds of refugees over the years, but none had ever looked at her quite like that. Like Megan had given her back something more valuable than just communication. Like she'd given her back her voice. Megan gathered her materials and headed for the door, already planning tomorrow's lesson. She wanted to teach Vayara emotions next: happy, sad, scared, safe. The important things. She thought about how quickly the Kashari had picked up the signs, how desperate she seemed to connect. It never occurred to Megan that she might be teaching the most important person in the galaxy. That this frightened, silent alien sitting in her shabby classroom was someone that half the known species were searching for. That their afternoon sessions would eventually change not just 2 lives, but the fate of entire civilizations. All Megan knew was that someone needed help, and she was going to provide it. That's what humans did best, after all. They saw someone struggling and they reached out a hand. They found ways to bridge impossible gaps. They refused to accept that anyone was truly voiceless. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness echo the loudest across the stars. Megan would learn that lesson soon enough. But for now, she just walked home through the Portland rain, thinking about sign language and sad amber eyes, completely unaware that everything was about to change. 3 weeks passed in a comfortable rhythm. Every afternoon at 2 o'clock, Vayara would arrive at Megan's classroom with what could only be described as excitement. Her sign language skills grew at an astonishing rate. What should have taken months, she mastered in days. Soon they were having actual conversations, discussing everything from Earth weather to the taste of coffee, which Vayara found absolutely disgusting. Megan discovered that beneath the silence, Vayara had a sharp sense of humor. When Megan accidentally signed bathroom instead of bedroom while describing her apartment, Vayara's shoulders shook with silent laughter, her amber eyes crinkling at the corners. It was the first time Megan had seen her truly relaxed. They became friends. Real friends. The kind where you didn't need words to understand each other, which was ironic given their entire relationship was built on creating new ways to communicate. Vayara would bring strange alien fruits from the refugee center's kitchen, and Megan would share her lunch. They'd sit by the window during breaks, watching rain fall on the Portland streets, just enjoying each other's company. But then the visitors started arriving. The first was a Kashari diplomat named Theron. He showed up on a Tuesday morning in flowing ceremonial robes that shimmered with embedded crystals. Megan was walking past the front desk when she saw him, his presence commanding immediate attention. Director Hayes looked flustered, shuffling papers and stammering about appointment schedules. "I seek information about Kashari refugees registered at this facility," Theron said, his voice echoing directly in everyone's minds. Telepathic communication always felt odd to Megan, like someone whispering right inside your skull. "Specifically, I search for those who may be experiencing communication difficulties." Megan felt her stomach tighten. She glanced toward her classroom where Vayara was waiting. Through the small window in the door, she could see her friend had gone completely still, staring at her hands. "We have several Kashari residents," Hayes said carefully. "But I can't discuss specific cases without proper authorization." Theron's eyes swept the lobby, and for a moment, Megan swore they lingered on her classroom door. "Of course. I shall return with appropriate documentation. This matter is of great importance to my people." After he left, Megan rushed to her classroom. Vayara sat rigid in her chair, trembling. "You okay?" Megan signed. Vayara's hands moved frantically. "Did you see him? The tall Kashari?" "Yeah. He was asking about refugees with communication problems. He's looking for me." Vayara's signs were sharp, panicked. "They're all looking for me." That's when the questions started tumbling out. Who was looking for her? Why did she run? What was she so afraid of? Vayara had always deflected personal questions before, keeping their conversations light and surface level. But now, trapped and scared, the truth began to spill out. The story came in pieces over the next few days, signed in quiet corners where no one could overhear. Vayara explained that Kashari society revolved around a figure called the Oracle. Every 1,000 years, one was born among their people. The Oracle was always different, always born without the telepathic gift that defined their species. This wasn't a curse but a sacred sign. The voiceless one would speak truth that the mindreaders could not. "The Oracle sees what we hide from each other," Vayara signed during one session. "Telepathy lets us deceive, create illusions in minds. But the Oracle speaks only truth through other means. Physical words that cannot lie. And you're this Oracle." Megan signed, though she already knew the answer. Vayara nodded miserably. "I was 12 when they discovered me. No telepathy. No voice. They were overjoyed. I was terrified." The previous Oracle had died 6 years ago, leaving the Kashari without guidance for the first time in centuries. Their civilization, so dependent on prophetic direction, had begun to fracture. Factions emerged, each claiming their own false prophets. Trade agreements with other species fell apart. Small conflicts escalated into wars. The Kashari were tearing themselves apart without their oracle to unite them. And Vayara had run away from it all. I couldn't handle it, she signed, tears streaming down her blue cheeks. Everyone wanted to use me. Control me. Make me say what they wanted to hear. I was just a kid, and they were putting the weight of an entire civilization on my shoulders. Megan reached across the table and took her friend's hands, stopping the anxious signing. So you've been hiding for 6 years. 5. I hid on my homeworld for a year before I finally escaped. Been moving from planet to planet ever since. Earth was supposed to be far enough away that they'd never think to look. But they were looking. Over the next week, more visitors arrived at the refugee center. A trade delegation from the Orion sector. Representatives from the Galactic Council. Even a group of Kashari religious leaders in elaborate robes, speaking in hushed telepathic conferences that made every human in the building uncomfortable. Director Hayes called Megan to his office on Friday afternoon. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened and hair disheveled. I've got 5 different governmental bodies breathing down my neck about Kashari refugees, he said. They are threatening legal action under the Refugee Accords. They have the right to verify the identity of their own citizens if there's a compelling governmental interest. You can't just hand her over, Megan protested. I don't want to. But unless there's a legitimate reason to refuse, I might not have a choice. They're talking about sending inspectors next week. That evening, Megan sat alone in her apartment, staring at her phone. She'd done some research on the Kashari situation, and it was worse than Vayara had described. Entire colony worlds were threatening to break away. 3 separate wars had broken out in Kashari space. Millions of beings across multiple species were suffering because trade routes and peace treaties had collapsed. And the person who could fix it all was hiding in her classroom, terrified and convinced she wasn't strong enough. Megan thought about all the refugees she'd helped over the years. People running from war, persecution, impossible situations. She'd always believed everyone deserved safety and choice. But what happened when one person's choice to hide meant millions of others suffered? The next afternoon, Megan found Vayara sitting in the dark classroom, staring out the window. We need to talk, Megan signed, turning on the lights. Vayara's hands moved defensively. I know what you're going to say. Do you? Because I'm not sure I know what I'm going to say yet. Megan sat down across from her. I won't let them take you if you don't want to go. I'll fight for you. But I need to ask you something first. Vayara waited, her amber eyes cautious. How many people are suffering because you're hiding here? The question hung in the air between them. Vayara's hands trembled but didn't move to answer. Because they both already knew. Millions. Maybe billions across the affected systems. War. Famine. Chaos. All because the Oracle had chosen silence over responsibility. They'll make me a puppet, Vayara finally signed. Use my words for their own power. Megan leaned forward. Maybe. Or maybe you do it differently this time. On your terms. How? And that's when Megan smiled, an idea forming. You've got something no Oracle has ever had before. A human translator who doesn't care about Kashari politics. Someone who'll make sure your real words get heard, not twisted versions that serve the powerful. For the first time since the visitors started arriving, hope flickered in Vayara's eyes. You'd come with me? If you want me to, Megan signed. Partners. We face it together. Vayara sat back, processing this. Outside the window, rain began to fall on Portland, the same rain that had been falling the day they first met. Everything was about to change. They both knew it. Finally, Vayara's hands moved with new determination. Okay. Let's do it. But we do it my way. Megan grinned. Wouldn't have it any other way. The Kashari delegation arrived on Monday morning with enough ceremony to make the evening news. 3 ships descended onto the refugee center's grounds, sleek vessels that gleamed like polished silver in the weak Portland sunlight. Reporters gathered at the gates with cameras and questions, trying to understand why such an important group would visit a simple refugee facility. Megan watched from her classroom window as the delegation emerged. There were at least 20 Kashari, all dressed in formal robes that marked them as high-ranking officials. Religious leaders with golden sashes. Government representatives with serious faces. Even what looked like military advisors, their bearing rigid and alert. Beside her, Vayara had gone pale, her blue skin almost white with fear. Her hands trembled so badly she could barely sign. "I changed my mind," she gestured frantically. "I can't do this. Look at them. They'll swallow me whole." Megan grabbed her friend's shaking hands, holding them still. "Hey, look at me. We talked about this. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. But hiding forever isn't really living either, is it?" Vayara pulled her hands away, signing angrily. "Easy for you to say. You're not the one they want to lock in a temple and parade around like some holy relic." "You're right. I'm not." Megan kept her voice gentle but firm. "But I've spent 3 years working with refugees. You know what I've learned? Running from fear doesn't make it smaller. It just means you're always looking over your shoulder." Before Vayara could respond, someone knocked on the door. Director Hayes entered, looking apologetic and stressed. Behind him stood 3 of the Kashari delegates, including Theron, the diplomat who'd visited weeks earlier. "Ms. Walsh, these representatives have legal authority under the Refugee Accords to verify the identity of Kashari citizens," Hayes said. His tone made it clear he wasn't happy about it. "They'd like to speak with any Kashari residents currently in your care." Theron's eyes locked onto Vayara. Even without telepathy, recognition was instant. He dropped to his knees so quickly it startled everyone in the room. The other 2 delegates followed, their foreheads touching the ground in a gesture of absolute reverence. "Oracle," Theron's mental voice resonated with awe and relief. "We have searched for you for so long. Our people are lost without your guidance. Please, you must return home." Vayara stood frozen, her back pressed against the wall. Megan could see the panic in her eyes, the urge to run. But there was nowhere to go. Not anymore. "Get up," Megan said sharply. "You're scaring her." Theron rose, confusion crossing his face. "Scaring her? We are her devoted servants. We live only to serve the Oracle's wisdom." "Yeah, that's exactly the problem," Megan shot back. She positioned herself between Vayara and the delegates. "You want a prophet you can control. Someone who'll tell you what you want to hear and make your decisions easy." "That is not true," one of the other delegates protested. "The Oracle speaks truth that guides our civilization." "Then why did she run?" Megan asked. "Why did a 12-year-old girl flee her own home rather than accept this honor you're offering?" The delegates exchanged uncomfortable glances. Clearly, this wasn't a question they'd expected from a human. Director Hayes cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should give everyone some space to process this. Ms. Walsh, could I speak with you outside?" In the hallway, Hayes ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Look, I get that you're protective of her. But this is bigger than us. The Kashari have legal rights here, and frankly, the political pressure is enormous. Half the Galactic Council is calling my bosses." "So you're just going to hand her over?" Megan demanded. "I'm saying we can't hold her prisoner either. She's an adult. She can make her own choice." He paused. "But Megan, you need to understand what's at stake. The Kashari civilization is collapsing. Wars are breaking out. Trade networks are failing. Millions of beings are suffering. And that's supposed to be one person's responsibility?" She didn't ask for this. "None of us ask for the roles we're given," Hayes said quietly. "But sometimes we have to step up anyway." Back in the classroom, Megan found Vayara sitting alone. The delegates had retreated to give her space, but their ships remained outside like patient predators. "They'll wait forever if they have to," Vayara signed. "They're very persistent." Megan pulled up a chair. "Can I tell you a story?" Vayara looked surprised but nodded. "When I was in college, I wanted to be a marine biologist. I had this whole plan: study dolphins, work on ocean conservation, save the world one ecosystem at a time." Megan smiled at the memory. "Then my mom got sick. Alzheimer's. I had to drop out, move home, take care of her. I was so angry. This wasn't the life I'd planned." "What happened?" Vayara sighed. "I spent 3 years caring for her. It was hard. Really hard. But I learned something important. She taught me patience, different ways of communicating when words failed, how to stay present with someone even when they couldn't remember who I was." Megan gestured around the classroom. "That's why I'm good at this job. Why I could help you. Because I learned that sometimes the life we don't choose teaches us things the planned life never would." Vayara's hands moved slowly. "You're saying I should accept being Oracle?" "I'm saying running has a cost too. Not just to your people, but to you. You've been hiding for 5 years, Vayara. Are you happy? Or are you just less scared? The question hit home. Vayara looked down at her hands, those elegant four-fingered hands that had learned to speak in ways her voice never could. I'm terrified, she signed. What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail them? Then you fail. But at least you tried. Megan leaned forward. And here's the thing, you don't have to do it their way. You're the Oracle. That means you make the rules. They won't let me. They don't have a choice. You hold all the power here, Vayara. They need you way more than you need them. A spark of something appeared in Vayara's amber eyes. Not quite confidence yet, but maybe the beginning of it. If I go back, you come with me, she signed firmly. As my official interpreter. Non-negotiable. Done. And I don't speak until I'm ready. No matter how much they pressure me. Agreed. And when I do speak, you make sure my exact words reach everyone. Not edited versions. Not interpretations. My actual words. Megan grinned. Now you're thinking like someone who's in charge. They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of the decision settling over them both. Outside, the 3 silver ships waited. Beyond them, an entire civilization held its breath. Finally, Vayara stood. Her hands moved with new determination. Okay. Let's do this. But Megan? Yeah? Thank you. For seeing me as a person first. Not as some sacred figure or political tool. Just as me. That's what friends do, Megan said simply. They walked to the door together. Vayara paused with her hand on the handle, took a deep breath, and pulled it open. The delegates were waiting in the hallway, hope and anxiety written on their faces. Vayara's hands moved, and Megan translated. I am the Oracle. And I will return home. But things are going to be different this time. We do this my way, or we don't do it at all. Theron looked like he wanted to argue, but the steel in Vayara's posture stopped him. He bowed deeply. As the Oracle commands. Megan caught Vayara's eye and gave her an encouraging nod. They were really doing this. A human teacher from Portland and a runaway prophet were about to walk into the heart of an alien civilization and demand change. It was absolutely terrifying. And somehow, that made it feel exactly right. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop running and face what you've been hiding from. Sometimes you have to accept that you're stronger than you think. And sometimes, having one person who truly believes in you makes all the difference between staying lost and finding your way home. Vayara had found that person in the most unlikely place, a shabby classroom in a refugee center, taught by a human who refused to see anyone as voiceless. Now it was time to see if that belief could change a civilization. The ships lifted off 2 hours later, carrying them toward the Kashari homeworld. Toward destiny. Toward whatever came next. Together. The journey to the Kashari homeworld took 4 days aboard the diplomatic vessel. Megan spent most of that time feeling completely out of place. The ship was designed for telepaths, with minimal spoken interfaces and crew members who communicated in comfortable silence. She was the only human aboard, the only one who needed words. Vayara stayed close, teaching her about Kashari culture and what to expect. The conversations happened in their shared sign language, creating a private bubble in the midst of all that silent communication. It felt intimate, like they were the only 2 people in the universe who truly understood each other. The Grand Temple is where I'll have to speak, Vayara signed one evening as they looked out at the stars streaming past. It holds 50,000 people. The entire High Council will be there. Religious leaders. Politicians. Everyone who matters. Sounds cozy, Megan joked, trying to ease the tension in her friend's shoulders. They'll expect traditional prophecies. Formal declarations about the future, delivered with ceremony and mysticism. Vayara's hands moved with bitter humor. They want a show. Then don't give them one, Megan said. Give them truth instead. That's what an oracle is supposed to do, right? When they finally arrived, Megan's breath caught in her throat. The Kashari homeworld was stunning. Crystalline towers stretched into violet skies, catching the light of twin suns and scattering rainbows across the cities below. Everything seemed to shimmer with an ethereal beauty that made Earth look dull by comparison. But as their ship descended, Megan noticed other things too. Damage to some of the towers. Military vessels patrolling the skies. Sections of the city that looked abandoned or destroyed. The scars of a civilization tearing itself apart. They landed at the Grand Temple, a massive structure that seemed to be carved from a single enormous crystal. Thousands of Kashari had gathered outside, held back by security barriers. When Vayara emerged from the ship, a sound rose from the crowd, not quite a cheer, but something deeper. A collective exhale of relief and hope. Megan walked beside her, very aware of how strange she must look. A short human woman in simple clothes, accompanying the most important figure in Kashari society. She caught stares and felt the weight of telepathic conversations she couldn't hear. People were definitely talking about her. Inside the temple, the High Council waited. 23 Kashari sat in an elevated semicircle, their robes elaborate with symbols Megan didn't understand. Religious leaders filled the lower sections, and behind them, thousands more Kashari packed every available space. The room hummed with silent telepathic chatter. At the center of it all stood a raised platform with 2 chairs. One ornate throne-like seat, clearly meant for the oracle. And beside it, a simple chair that hadn't been there originally. Someone had added it at the last minute. That chair was for Megan. High Counselor Drozhin, an elderly Kashari with silver markings on his face, stood to address the assembly. His mental voice boomed through the chamber, translated for Megan through a small device they'd given her. We gather in joy and reverence. The oracle has returned to guide us through these troubled times. For 6 years we have wandered in darkness, but now the light returns. Vayara's hand found Megan's, squeezing tightly. They walked together to the platform and Saturday. Every eye in the temple fixed on them. Oracle, Drozhin continued, we beseech you to share your wisdom. Our people are divided. Wars rage in the outer colonies. False prophets have led many astray. Tell us what we must do to restore unity and peace. The crowd waited in perfect silence. This was the moment they'd anticipated for years. The oracle's grand return, complete with cosmic prophecies and mystical guidance. Vayara's hands began to move, and Megan translated in a clear, steady voice that carried through the amplification system. You want me to fix your problems. To tell you what to do so you don't have to think for yourselves. But that's not why I ran away. And that's not why I came back. Shock rippled through the assembly. This wasn't the formal, flowery language of traditional prophecy. Vayara continued signing, her movements sharp and deliberate. I was 12 years old when you discovered I was the oracle. Do you know what you did? You took me from my family. Put me in a golden cage. Told me I existed only to serve. That my purpose was to carry the weight of civilization on a child's shoulders. Drozhin looked uncomfortable. Oracle, these are sacred traditions. Be quiet, Megan translated, and the bluntness of it made several council members gasp. I'm speaking now. You'll listen. Vayara stood, her tall frame commanding attention. Her hands moved with increasing confidence. You didn't want an oracle. You wanted a puppet. Someone to rubber-stamp your decisions and make you feel righteous about your choices. When the previous oracle died, did you mourn her as a person? Or did you just panic about losing your convenient authority figure? The council members shifted uncomfortably. No one dared interrupt. I ran because I saw what you do to oracles. How you use them. Control them. Twist their words to serve whoever has the most power. And look what happened without me, you fell apart. Because you never learned to think for yourselves. Megan's voice carried Vayara's words through the vast chamber, and she could see them landing like hammer blows. Some Kashari looked angry. Others thoughtful. Many simply shocked. But I came back because I learned something while I was gone, Vayara signed. I learned that hiding from responsibility isn't the same as being free. I learned that my voice matters, even if it comes through different hands. And I learned that real prophecy isn't about telling people what they want to hear. She turned slowly, addressing the entire assembly. You want to know the future? It is. The wars in the outer colonies will intensify unless you address the resource disputes you've been ignoring. The Valdran system will break away completely within 3 months if you don't honor the treaty you violated. And your economy will collapse unless you stop relying on trade partners you've been cheating for years. The specificity shocked everyone. These weren't vague mystical pronouncements. These were concrete, testable predictions about real situations. But those are just symptoms, Vayara continued. The real problem is you. This council. You've become corrupt. You use telepathy to hide your lies, to have secret conversations away from public scrutiny. You've forgotten that leadership is supposed to serve the people, not rule over them. Drozhin stood, his face flushed with anger. This is outrageous. The oracle cannot speak to the High Council this way. Vayara's hands moved, and Megan couldn't help but smile as she translated. The oracle can speak however she wants. That's kind of the whole point of being the oracle. And if you don't like it, there's the door. but I'm the only one you've got, so maybe sit down and listen. Several members of the audience made sounds that might have been suppressed laughter. Even some council members looked like they were fighting smiles. Druzhin sat, seething but silent. Over the next hour, Vayara delivered prophecy after prophecy. But these weren't mystical riddles. They were hard truths about corruption, inequality, and the Kashari people's own failures. She called out specific council members by name, revealing secrets they'd kept hidden through telepathic manipulation. She exposed plots, lies, and schemes that had been invisible to the public. And Megan translated every single word, her voice never wavering. She made sure nothing was softened or edited. This was Vayara's truth, delivered exactly as intended. The amazing thing was that every prediction could be verified. Within days, events unfolded exactly as Vayara had described. The Valdran system did threaten to break away. The resource disputes did escalate. The economic indicators matched her warnings perfectly. She wasn't guessing. She genuinely could see patterns and futures that others couldn't. But she delivered those truths without ceremony or mysticism. Just clear, direct statements that left no room for manipulation. As the session ended, the temple buzzed with telepathic chaos. Some were outraged. Others energized. A few council members looked genuinely frightened, probably those whose secrets had just been exposed. Vayara and Megan walked out together, hand in hand. Outside, crowds had gathered, having heard broadcasts of what happened inside. An elderly Kashari woman approached them, moving slowly through the security barriers. She was small and frail, with marks on her face that indicated age and wisdom. She looked at Vayara and signed, actually signed in the same language Megan had taught her friend. "Thank you," her hand said. "For speaking truth. For showing us that even without telepathy, your voice is the clearest of all." Tears streamed down Vayara's face as she signed back. "You know sign language? My daughter was born without telepathy. She died young because we thought she was broken." The old woman's hands trembled. "But she wasn't broken. We were. Thank you for showing us that." As they walked back to their quarters, Megan realized something profound had just happened. Vayara hadn't just delivered prophecies. She'd started a revolution in how the Kashari saw truth, communication, and power itself. And it had all started in a shabby classroom in Portland, with a human teacher who refused to see anyone as voiceless. Megan stayed on the Kashari homeworld for 8 months, and during that time, she watched a civilization transform itself from the inside out. The first change came within days of Vayara's initial prophecies. Every prediction she'd made started coming true with eerie accuracy. The Valdran system did threaten to secede, exactly as she'd warned. The resource disputes in the outer colonies escalated precisely when she'd said they would. Even the economic indicators matched her projections down to the smallest detail. But unlike previous oracles, Vayara didn't just predict, she explained. She showed the Kashari people the patterns they'd been missing, the consequences of their choices, the chains of cause and effect they'd ignored. And because Megan translated everything directly to public broadcasts, no one could hide from the truth anymore. The High Council tried to control the narrative at first. They attempted to limit Vayara's public appearances, to filter her messages through appropriate channels. That lasted exactly 1 day before Vayara simply walked into the city square and started signing to crowds while Megan translated through a borrowed loudspeaker. After that, the council realized they had 2 choices: work with the oracle or become irrelevant. Most chose to adapt. The more profound change, though, came from something Megan hadn't expected. It started with that elderly woman outside the temple, the one whose daughter had been born without telepathy. Word spread that the oracle herself used sign language. That she communicated not through the telepathy that defined Kashari culture, but through physical gestures that anyone could see and learn. Within weeks, signs began appearing throughout the cities. Not written signs, but Kashari practicing hand gestures, learning the language Megan had taught Vayara. Parents with non-telepathic children sought out instruction. Schools started offering classes. What had been a private language between 2 friends became a public movement. "I don't understand what's happening," Vayara signed to Megan one evening as they watched the sunset from their apartment in the Temple District. "Why are they so eager to learn this?" Megan thought about it. "Because telepathy can lie. Your people have figured that out the hard way. But sign language? It's visible. Public. Honest. When you sign something in a crowd, everyone sees the same message. No one can claim you said something different." It was true. The Kashari had built their entire civilization on telepathic communication, but that same ability had made deception easy. Private mental conversations could exclude and manipulate. Powerful telepaths could create illusions or alter perceptions. But sign language was democratic, transparent, revolutionary. More importantly, it gave voice to Kashari who'd been marginalized their entire lives. They emerged slowly at first. Kashari born without telepathy, who'd been hidden away in shame, treated as damaged or defective. Now they came out into the light, their hands moving in the same language their oracle used. Within months, there were thousands of them. They'd always existed, but Kashari society had pretended they didn't. Vayara met with them regularly, and Megan watched her friend transform. The scared, uncertain refugee who'd hidden in Portland became a confident leader who radiated quiet strength. She didn't just speak prophesize, she built community. She created space for the voiceless to finally be heard. One of those people was a young Kashari named Talia, barely 16, who'd spent her whole life in an institution because her family considered her an embarrassment. When she met Vayara, she wept. "I thought I was alone," Talia signed, her movements clumsy but heartfelt. "I thought something was wrong with me." "Nothing is wrong with you," Vayara signed back, pulling the girl into a hug. "You're perfect exactly as you are. And you're not alone anymore." The Oracle's temple became a gathering place for non-telepathic Kashari. They held classes there, taught sign language, created support networks. Megan found herself training other teachers, sharing techniques she developed over years of working with refugees. It was exhausting and exhilarating all at once. The political changes rippled outward too. Vayara's exposure of corruption had forced the High Council to implement transparency measures. All council meetings were now broadcast publicly, with sign language interpretation. Secret telepathic conferences were banned. Several corrupt members had been removed, replaced by representatives who actually cared about serving the people. The wars in the outer colonies didn't end overnight, but they de-escalated. Vayara's prophecies had given both sides information they needed to find common ground. Trade agreements were renegotiated fairly. The Valdran system stayed in the fold after genuine reforms addressed their grievances. But Megan's favorite change was smaller and more personal. Throughout Kashari cities, parents started teaching their children sign language alongside telepathy. It became a rite of passage, learning to communicate in ways that everyone could see and understand. The language of the Oracle became the language of honesty, transparency, and inclusion. 6 months into their stay, the Galactic Council officially recognized sign language as a diplomatic language. Representatives from dozens of species started learning it, seeing value in a form of communication that couldn't be hacked, intercepted, or manipulated by telepaths. Earth's government even reached out to Megan, offering her a position as an official cultural liaison. She politely declined. She had more important work to do. But eventually, she knew she had to go home. The refugee center had hired a replacement, but Director Hayes kept sending messages saying they missed her. Her apartment in Portland was waiting. Her life was waiting. "I need to go back," Megan signed to Vayara one morning. They were sitting in the temple gardens, surrounded by blooming crystal flowers that chimed softly in the breeze. Vayara nodded, though sadness filled her amber eyes. "I know. You have your own life. I can't keep you here forever." "You don't need me anymore anyway," Megan said gently. "You've got hundreds of interpreters now. Thousands of people who speak your language. You're not alone." "I'll always need you," Vayara signed. "You're my best friend. The person who saw me when I was just scared and hiding. Who believed in me before I believed in myself." They hugged for a long time, two beings from different worlds who'd found something precious in each other. Megan returned to Earth on a commercial transport, traveling through normal space like a regular person instead of on fancy diplomatic vessels. It felt right somehow. Grounding. The refugee center threw her a welcome back party. Director Hayes had cake, which was slightly burned because he'd made it himself. Her old classroom looked exactly the same, like she'd never left. But everything had changed. Within weeks, aliens started arriving specifically to learn about human communication methods. The center became famous not for its medical facilities or housing, but for its teaching programs. Species from across the galaxy wanted to understand how humans built bridges between different peoples, how they created languages that anyone could learn. Megan found herself training teachers from a dozen different worlds. She shared techniques, philosophies, approaches to communication that humans had developed over thousands of years. Things she'd taken for granted became revolutionary insights to species who'd relied solely on telepathy or technological translation. A Kashari delegation visited 3 months after her return. They weren't looking for refugees this time. They came to establish a formal cultural exchange program, teaching sign language to humans while learning other communication methods Earth had developed. Vayara visited too, whenever her duties allowed. She'd arrive without fanfare, just show up at Megan's door with that same gentle smile. They'd spend evenings talking in sign language, sharing stories about their separate but connected lives. One afternoon, while teaching a class of newly arrived refugees, Megan had a moment of clarity. She was demonstrating basic signs to a group that included two Kashari, a methane breather in an environmental suit, something that looked like a floating jellyfish, and a species she couldn't even identify. And they were all learning. All finding ways to communicate across impossible differences. A small Kashari child in the front row, one born without telepathy, raised her hand excitedly. "Teacher Megan, is it true you taught the Oracle? That you're the reason we can all talk now?" Megan smiled. "I taught a friend who needed help. She's the one who changed everything. I just showed her that being different doesn't mean being voiceless." The child beamed and practiced her signs with renewed enthusiasm. After class, Megan stood alone in the empty classroom, looking at the posters on the wall showing sign language alphabets in a dozen different formats. She thought about Vayara, probably sitting in some grand temple light years away, delivering prophecies that continued to reshape Kashari civilization. Two very different lives, connected by friendship and a shared belief that everyone deserved to be heard. Her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Vayara, just a simple video. Her friend's hands moved in sign language, backlit by the violet sky of her homeworld. "Thank you for everything. Thank you for seeing me. I miss you, my dear friend." Megan smiled and recorded her own response. "Miss you too. Same time next month for your visit? I found this amazing Thai place you need to try." She sent it off and turned back to preparing tomorrow's lesson plans. There was a new family arriving from the Andromeda sector, refugees from a war that had made them lose everything. They'd need patience, kindness, and someone willing to help them find their voice in a strange new world. Megan was good at that. Humanity was good at that. They hadn't conquered the galaxy with superior weapons or advanced technology. They'd changed it through something much simpler and much more powerful, the absolute conviction that every being, no matter how different, deserved to communicate and be understood. One classroom at a time. One friendship at a time. One voice at a time. That was humanity's real gift to the stars. Not dominance, but connection. Not power, but understanding. And in a universe full of incredible species with amazing abilities, that turned out to be the most extraordinary thing of all.